This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel under assault as Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza fire more than 2,000 rockets into southern and central Israel, all the way to Jerusalem. Israel responds by pounding hundreds of terror targets inside the Gaza Strip. Plus, CBN partners provide a life-saving shelter for Israelis in harm's way. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. For the first time since 2014, Israeli troops are massing on the Gaza border for a possible incursion into Gaza in order to stop the constant barrage of rockets from Hamas and other Islamic groups. Here's a look at the time we spent in southern Israeli communities under fire near the border, where the rocket fire has put millions of Israelis in harm's way, and a look at how the dramatic events of the week unfolded. This video shows the buildup of tanks, troops, and equipment along Israel's border with Gaza. Israel has called up thousands of reservists for what many here believe could be a ground invasion into Gaza after days of constant rocket fire.
And we are prepared for any potential scenario as the military, and additional guidance we'll get from the political level. But we'll do whatever is necessary, whatever we can do to make sure that people can sleep in their homes and that what you're seeing here doesn't happen.
Since Monday, Hamas and other Palestinian terror groups from the Gaza Strip, about 2 miles behind me, have fired around 2,000 rockets into southern and central Israel. But it's becoming clear Israel is not just fighting these Palestinian groups, but the one who funds, arms, and supports them, the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is a Palestinian Islamic Jihad official boasting of its relationship with Iran.
The Mujahideen in Gaza and in Lebanon use Iranian weapons to strike the Zionists. We buy our weapons with Iranian money. An important part of our activity is under the supervision of Iranian experts. I'm not sorry. I'm proud to say that the rockets that are used to pound Tel Aviv have an Iranian signature on them, the signature of Qasem Soleimani.
With Iran's support for the terrorists, more than 1 million Israelis are living under the threat of rockets falling at any moment.
Put it in park, put it in park.
This is the town of Ofakim near the border. Our CBN News crew hit the ground when we heard the red alert alarm. Well, that's what it's like for Israelis down here in southern Israel. We're in a town called Ofakim. We heard the red alert called Seva Adom. We had to stop the car, get out, and just lay on the ground. That's what Israelis have been doing for several days now, and maybe several more, depending on what happens inside the Gaza Strip. Moments later, the siren sounded again, and this time we joined Israelis rushing for the nearest bomb shelter. Naama Gigi shared what life is like with this constant threat.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. I'm live here, but I'm working near to Gaza, Israel-Gaza border, and then there we have 10 seconds. So I remember a year ago, 2 years ago actually, when siren was on, and we just took babies and ran inside the bomb shelter, and you don't have time to think.
With no sign that Hamas and other terror groups are willing to stop the rocket fire, it appears Israel is now willing to put boots on the ground to end this conflict and keep Israelis out of bomb shelters. The massive rocket fire from Gaza began on May 10th. On Monday afternoon, sirens wailed in the city of Jerusalem for the first time since 2014. These Israelis had gathered on Jerusalem Day to march into the city, celebrating the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967. Police also evacuated the Western Wall during the sirens. Several rockets did hit communities on the outskirts of Jerusalem, damaging homes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Hamas and other Islamic groups.
This evening on Jerusalem Day, the terrorist organizations in Gaza have crossed the red line and attacked us with missiles in the outskirts of Jerusalem. Israel will respond with great force. We will not tolerate attacks on our territory or our capital, on our citizens or our soldiers.
Later in the week, the rocket barrages increased substantially. In the heaviest fighting since 2014, Hamas and other terror groups fired more than 1,000 rockets within a day and a half. It's the largest ever rocket fire on south and central Israel. The rocket salvos and the interceptions by the Iron Dome anti-missile system lit up the night sky over Tel Aviv in what looked like a Star Wars battle. Israel suspended flights from David Ben-Gurion Airport for an hour when rocket fire hit nearby. During the day, the skies over southern Israel witnessed the aerial battle between the rockets and the Iron Dome.
All of these rockets were fired from densely populated civilian areas in Gaza by terrorists, blatantly disregarding human life and security of Palestinians and aiming to kill Israeli civilians. We are responding to Hamas's aggression by firing rockets at Israel, at our capital, and by forcing more than 1.5 million Israeli civilians into shelter.
In a campaign called Guardians of the Wall, Israel launched more than 500 surgical airstrikes to stop the rocket fire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Israel's security cabinet.
The conclusion of the meeting is to increase even more the force of the strikes and also the rate of the strikes. Hamas will now receive blows that it did not expect, and I know that this also involves patience and a certain sacrifice on your part, citizens of Israel.
Inside Gaza, Hamas vowed to keep fighting, and its leader, Ismail Haniyeh, said it shifted the balance of power. While Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system has shot down more than 90% of those rockets, a number have hit Israeli communities like Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Petah Tikva, killing 7 Israelis, including a 6-year-old boy. Israel responding with hundreds of surgical strikes in Gaza to stop the deadly barrages. Many of Hamas's rockets are supplied by Iran, leading 44 Republican senators to call on President Biden to suspend its nuclear talks with the Islamic regime. President Biden spoke at length with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and affirmed Israel's right to defend itself. Israel then found itself fighting an internal conflict. Israel is also seeing the worst Jewish-Arab violence in at least 20 years. Arabs have rioted in several Israeli towns, and Jews have attacked Arabs, in one instance, on live TV. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the violence on both sides.
Nothing justifies the lynching of Arabs by Jews, and nothing justifies the lynching of Jews by Arabs. We will not tolerate this. This violence is not us.
Before the internal battle, riots had rocked Jerusalem for more than 2 weeks. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah Party called for more demonstrations in Jerusalem with this video. This is Jerusalem calling to its residents. And Jerusalem, we will redeem it with our lives. We will sacrifice for the sake of the Al-Aqsa Mosque until the last breath. We will turn the world upside down for the sake of this homeland. Former UN Ambassador for Israel Danny Danon told CBN News Abbas has been behind the riots of the past few weeks.
We have to understand that it is not a spontaneous riot. It is orchestrated by President Abbas from the beginning. He decided to cancel the elections in the Palestinian Authority, and he knew that there would be a lot of criticism about that. And immediately he put the focus on Jerusalem. They are using the holy site of Jerusalem in order to incite riots and violence.
The riots for the last 2 weeks and the rockets of the last several days come during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, when there were increased calls for martyrdom, jihad, and holy war. Hopes were high that the situation would calm down with the end of Ramadan on Wednesday. Now it looks like Israel could be preparing for war. Coming up, a look at the incident that many believe helped spark the current conflict. It's called Sheikh Jarrah, a neighborhood here in Jerusalem, and it's the place where many believe the spark was lit to start the current conflict. As the world watches this escalation involving Israelis, Arabs, and Palestinians, more questions about what led to the outbreak. Some are tracing it to the eastern Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, where clashes have led to protests and calls for cutting diplomatic ties between Israel and Jordan. The seeds of the feud go back decades. In 1948, Jordan took control of eastern Jerusalem, including Sheikh Jarrah. Jews living here were expelled or even killed. Then Jordan and the United Nations gave the area to Arab families. Almost 20 years later, during the Six-Day War, Israel took the area back when it reunited Jerusalem.
My father took the house from the Jordanian in 1956. there is agreement between Jordanian and UNRWA. Jordanian give the land, and the UNRWA built a 28 house for 28 refugee family.
Now, after 65 years, 4 families with more than 70 people face eviction. Jewish Israelis plan to move in their place. But Israel argues the Jewish claim on the land goes back long before 1948.
We have to know the history of this place. We call it Shimon HaTzadik. The land around the tomb of Shimon was purchased by the Jewish community, dated back to 1840.
According to Jerusalem's deputy mayor, the two sides had agreed to a legal compromise, whereby the Palestinian residents would be protected tenants, paying a minimal rent without fear of eviction.
Ultimately, we're talking about a property dispute. One of the parties who can prove ownership, and another party who are seen legally as squatters because they moved into this house after 1948. And now we have a property claim that, of course, has been conflagrated by everybody in the West.
Hassan Nahum tells CBN News that the residents were then told to abandon the compromise.
The Palestinian Authority sent their lawyers. The minute they were involved, the minute this became political, they had no interest in helping people stay in their homes. They wanted people to get kicked out publicly in order for Israel to get reprimanded by the entire world.
David Cohen, member of a Jewish family in the neighborhood, has seen a difference among his Arab neighbors.
I can tell you that in the last 2 weeks, suddenly everything changed. They see me and every person that looks Jewish as an enemy, as someone who's really dangerous.
Cohen told CBN News of a conversation with one of his Arab friends.
And he said, at this time we're photographed. They're paying attention to us and checking us. It's forbidden for me to have a good contact with you.
Israel maintains it's working to calm the situation, such as delaying a Supreme Court hearing on the issue. It's also calling for international pressure on the Palestinian Authority to stop the incitement and publicly call for an end to Palestinian violence and terrorism. Coming up, a look back at what's called the Gaza disengagement, how its impact is being felt today. Here's a story we did a few years ago on the 10th anniversary of Israel's disengagement from the Gaza Strip. That's when the Israeli government moved more than 9,000 Jewish Israelis from their homes in the Gaza Strip and 4 West Bank communities. This so-called disengagement was supposed to open the way for peace, but instead led to war with the terror group Hamas. And as you'll see, the situation has only gotten worse.
Moshav Nativ HaAsara sits on the front lines of the Israeli-Hamas conflict. CBN's Scott Ross recently visited there and toured the community with resident Hila Fenlon.
You know, you're in a center of a village that looks, in first look, normal village. And when you look over there, for example, you can see there's a bomb shelter.
That's a bomb shelter?
That's a bomb shelter. And this room over here, yes, that is a bomb shelter. But in the last 14 years, when our kids are waiting for the school bus, they're waiting here on the doorstep of a bomb shelter, because if the alarm starts, they have less than 3 or 4 seconds to find shelter. So if you have less than
3 or 4 seconds?
Seconds, if we're lucky.
Nativ HaAsara is the closest Israeli community to the Gaza border.
Since the disengagement, it's put the whole village into the range of mortars. Now, mortars are official weapon, made in Iran, made in Russia. We know it because we see the serial number and it says made in Iran.
Have many people been killed?
We had 3 people that lost their lives. But the real story of the mortars and the rockets is not how many people are being killed. It's what happens to you. They are not trying to kill us, they're trying to break our spirit.
In 2005, then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon unilaterally moved 21 Israeli communities from the Gaza Strip. 3 villages facing Nativ HaAsara soon became launch pads for sending rockets into Israel. Now they're Hamas outposts and training grounds. The Israeli government at the time argued that the one-sided withdrawal would reduce friction with the Palestinians and pave the way to peace. Instead, Hamas won legislative elections in 2006 and eventually seized control of Gaza. Since then, rockets have rained down on Israel, leading to war with Hamas.
You're a mother, you have children. Would you want to live somewhere away from this threat in safety?
First of all, of course I do, but you don't leave home for war. If I leave, day one, and I don't have the privilege to lose this war.
And if rockets weren't bad enough, last summer's war revealed a frightening new scenario: tunnels.
Is this Gaza over here?
There's a road that goes all the way along over there. So this is the actual border between Israel and Gaza. This is Gaza City, this is Israel.
Where was the tunnel?
The tunnel was just over there, just behind us, closer to the houses. It was a mile long, half a mile into the Palestinian side and half a mile into the Israeli side.
A mile?
A mile long.
And you could drive through it?
A car can go through, yeah, with electricity, with ventilation. It's meant to serve a very, very big operation.
How do you know they're not building new tunnels?
We know the building, we don't know where.
Do you have much of a military presence here? Israeli soldiers?
Israel always said they use other means than actual presence. I do feel sometimes abandoned on the border, that's true.
What is that?
This is shooting. Someone is shooting at someone. Probably Hamas practicing somewhere, or I don't know. You see there's some military, I think maybe we might want to go away actually.
Really?
Yes.
At the border, there are two walls, one to stop sniper fire, the other to stop attackers from entering the community.
And this is where Hamas is practicing for the next war right now, as we speak. They are just behind this wall.
People pray all over the world for the peace of Israel, the peace in this land would come, that people's wishes are here. Yeah.
So that's something I appreciate a lot, and I hope it will help as well.
Up next, see how a gift by CBN partners on the front lines of today's fighting is saving lives. The thousands of rockets flying in southern Israel this week made a recent gift from CBN donors all the more relevant. Take a look. CBN Israel recently installed a bomb shelter at a playground in the town of Yesha, a Jewish community in southern Israel that is often targeted by rockets from Gaza, and it wasn't a moment too soon. Gil Rafua and his wife Shira like to take their children to the playground that's right around the corner from their home, and they say the new shelter is important for their kids to live a normal life.
From one side, you want to let them be kids, playing, having fun, do what kids do. And there is another side. The side is always worried, always have to be on control, always have to know what's going on. So that's how we live here.
It can be very quiet and suddenly a bombing. The more bomb shelters there will be, the security feeling will be higher. We can go to the playground and we know there's another shelter there that we can count on.
In less than a week, Hamas and other terrorists have launched some 2,000 rockets at communities like Yesha in southern Israel and beyond. Those who live in Yesha and communities close to them have less than 15 seconds to make it to the bomb shelter. We visited them a second time during this current wave of attacks.
It's rough. We didn't have a lot of sleepless night. We had a lot of sirens.
This is the bomb shelter CBN partners provided for the people of Yesha. During this time of constant rocket fire from Gaza just a couple of miles away, it came at just the right time.
It's a game changer for us, the people who live in Yesha. That the fact that we know it's here, it's amazing.
Gil suffers from PTSD due to his time serving with the police and as a medic. He says he is grateful for CBN Israel's donation of the bomb shelter, and having it where his children play will give him and Shira more peace of mind the next time they hear the sirens.
Well, a lot of people are talking and doing, but here you're actually here at this time.
And at the end of our visit, our CBN News team experienced what it means to have a shelter nearby.
You got a live one. That's how it sounds.
And back outside, we saw the smoke from the Iron Dome interceptions.
I don't think that I can express in words what I'm feeling now, but a big, big thank you and just a hug, a hug from the heart.
Having that shelter there now, I can feel more secure to send them to play. Gives a lot of relief. For us, it's a great gift. It's heartwarming to know that people are looking out for us and giving what they can. Thank you.
Well, that's one practical way you can help the people of Israel. And please pray for the people of Israel in harm's way, the innocent people in Gaza, and for wisdom for Israel's leaders. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.